I had this massive dry spell of about 6 months where just absolute crickets, like nobody in my inbox, nothing was landing. And I had just this real crisis of confidence in myself and in my decision making. And I really considered it. So I went to this cabin in Mississippi and wandered around and walked around in the woods. And one day this little voice came into my head and was like, well, what if you just quintupled your prices? And I immediately dismissed it because I was like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But then I landed my biggest client to date, and it's really changed the entire trajectory of my business.
For 6 long years, our guest today was stuck at a solid 6-figure ceiling, feeling the exhaustion of running an agency that she eventually dismantled just to stay sane. Following a terrifying 6-month stretch with 0 new leads, she retreated to a cabin in the woods and asked herself a question that most business owners are too afraid to even whisper. By making one radical change to her pricing structure and fundamentally shifting how she presented her expertise, she didn't just find a new client. She landed the biggest contract of her career within weeks and transformed her business into a multi-7-figure business. Welcome to today's episode of Your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, author of Your Business Growth Playbook, and my guest today is Rachel Allen. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into some of this backstory. I really enjoyed our conversations learning more about your journey to not just starting your business, but what got you to and through that plateau. But let's rewind back in time. We're going back to like the 2008 recession era. You had a journalism degree. Tell us about what got you from the world of journalism into marketing with just $200 to your name.
Yeah. Well, it's a journey that most people think is really cool, and it is, but it was mostly terrifying during. So I had a degree in journalism, and just to date it even more, I got a degree in new journalism, which, get this, it was journalism on the internet. Woo! So very exciting. And I graduated at the '08 recession. Of course, no one was hiring, particularly not people from rural Tennessee, which is where I was. And so in my 22-year-old brain, I was like, well, what's the furthest I can get away from Tennessee? And it turns out that's Hong Kong. So I bought a plane ticket, and I left, but I didn't do a couple of crucial things, including getting a work visa before I left. So I landed there and had about $200 in my bank account. I needed to make rent. And so I'm Googling like how to make money online, which is only marginally less ridiculous than it would be now. And I saw all the scams, and then this thing came through and it was like, oh, it's a copywriting job. And I'm like, copywriting? I don't know what that is, but I know how to write. Let's see. And I gave it a try, and they paid me and I was hooked.
Nice. So that one freelance gig turned into a whole business. Was there like a gap you saw in the marketplace or something you were filling? Because like copywriting, given even how that was advertised, is a sort of competitive space. What were you doing differently, or how did you differentiate?
I mean, the first thing I did was just like born out of utter desperation, which is I worked really, really, really fast. This was back in the day of content mills. And so it was all about quantity over quality. One of the very first jobs I actually got was people would pay me 9 cents per question to come up with questions for other writers to answer. And I was like, sure, I can ask questions. So it was all volume in the beginning, and I wasn't treating it like a real business. It was just like, how much money can I get in as quickly as possible to pay my bills? Because I don't know what's happening.
Now that business built up beyond just these gigs and pay per question to something a little more substantial. Tell us what that business was when you were at that, you crossed into that 6-figure territory. What was the business model? Who you were serving? How were you helping these businesses on the communication side?
Yeah. So when I first hit that level, I was working still solo. I was as I guess you would call a senior copywriter role. So I had done all of my chops. I built up the expertise and started working with clients who had really fallen in love with the way that I shared their voice. And I ended up differentiating myself in the market in that they would feel like nobody else understood them like I did, and nobody else could present them like I could. So I built this beautiful little boutique practice that was working super great. And then I was like, well, what if I changed everything and built it into an agency? Mostly because that was what you were supposed to do, right? It was all about like, you got to scale, you got to build the team. That's the next step. So I didn't think a lot about it. I just did it. And it actually, it worked out fine. I ended up expanding my market. I was working with people in all these different places. I had a team. It should have been great, but I really, really just hated it. I found it very exhausting, but I stuck with it because, of course, you have the sunk cost fallacy. And then I was like, well, one more year and then it's going to be easy. Just one more, this one, next one for sure. And eventually I had to finally come to grips with the fact that it was never going to get easier. And I just didn't really like it.
So what was that initial growth like though, as it was building up, to that level before you got, sick of it? Tell us about what that was like as you're landing new clients, finding your voice and hearing what your clients loved about their work with you.
Yeah. Well, I think it was honestly, a lot of mindset shifting on the back end because it's so natural for me, almost compulsive to write. And so the thought that anyone would pay me to do such a thing and find it really valuable was just mind blowing to me. So I had to work through that and then realize I can charge more than $15 for a blog post. Oh my goodness, people will pay me 5-6 figures for this. What are we even doing? So it was a lot of that. And as far as just business model, it was figuring out who do I actually like working for? I'd taken on some contracts with larger companies and they were fine, but I found that I really enjoyed the one-to-one interaction with people because it fed my very introverted soul. And also I love having longer term relationships with people where I really get to know their business and grow with them. I mean, my oldest client right now, I've been working with for 15 years and I love having been a part of that whole journey of her business.
Yeah, that's beautiful to have that longevity, that the longer term relationship there. That can be limiting in some ways too, but despite that, you found that growth. And all this time you were traveling during that time still, or living in Hong Kong, or what was the situation?
Yeah, I ended up moving about 6 months or every 6 months for 10 years. So I lived all over Europe, a little bit in South America, just kind of everywhere.
Was that visa related or just travel bug related?
Both. I think it was, it's always fun playing visa roulette, getting in and out of places. And a lot of times, most countries, you have 6 months to a year before you have to either leave and come back or, get serious about it. But also, it was exciting. I had a bunch of money coming in. I was living this life that I never thought would be possible for me. So I was like, sure, why not go live in Bulgaria for a while?
It's interesting. I've talked to, many business owners, worked with many clients over the years who have gone the nomad route. And sometimes it's a 6-figure business, right? 7. I've even worked with 8-figure business owners who, take a year or two to travel the world with their family while running an 8-figure business from afar. Sometimes, only an hour or so a week. But, that all depends sort of where you are in this journey. But in your business, you spent 6 years sort of stuck at the same revenue level. What was that all about? What was, that just one more year, maybe this will be different. Bring us there.
So I had felt so excited when I first reached 6 figures because that's the big dream, right? And statistically, many businesses never get there. They most fail in the first 2 years. So I was already I've reached the unicorn status. And so I had to really do some thinking of do I want more than this? Am I happy with this? What do I want my life to look like? And what metrics out of this are vanity metrics for me and what do I actually want? So I went through the process of thinking that through. And then I sort of fell back into, I guess, well, I don't really know what I want. So I guess I should do what everybody else is doing, which, critical error. But that's how I got into this agency model. And I think as many people know, but I didn't going in because I didn't bother to research it. I just tried it. You have to have a lot of things in place for that to work. One of which is you have to be really great at managing a team, which turns out I'm really much better at managing other people's teams than my own. You have to have your pricing margins correct. You have to have the right offer, and you have to be able as the leader to step into that leader role as opposed to I'm the leader, but also I'm going to rewrite everything and touch everything and get all up in my team's business. And I was bad at most of those things. And because it's not what I was really wanted to be doing anyway,
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if you've heard this phrase, don't shit all over yourself. But very often we see other business owners and what they're doing and we think we've got to do that, right? Everyone appears to be scaling. So I must scale to be this unicorn, decacorn of a company, or everyone else manages or has team or does this thing. So that just should be what I do. And that's not always the case. I love that you found there were things that you enjoy doing and things that you didn't, things that you were good at and things that you weren't, and didn't fall into the trap of, I must be better at the things I'm not good at. We can also just work around that or hire for that or build out. So at some point, Rachel, you got to this point with your agency where you decide maybe we scale the agency back, even though it's successful. That is an interesting decision point. What was that decision process like for you? How did you decide which way to go?
Well, it took place over the course of about 2 years, honestly, because as soon as I started having the whisperings of like, but what if I shut it down? And I was like, don't be foolish, brain. Come on. Like, of course, like we've decided this plan. We have to follow it. And I kept having these nudges of like, oh, but what would it be like if I were able to work, with hiring clients one-to-one over longer contracts? What if I did less writing? Because that was one of the motivations that got me into the agency. Oh, I'd like to do less writing. And at no time did I think, well, maybe I should just do less writing. So I had that keep coming up over and over again. And then I went through the whole decision of like, oh, but I've invested so much time. I built this structure. I have this team. People are relying on me, all the things that we do. And eventually I, kind of out of nowhere, I had a friend who made it possible for me to go up to the Arctic for a polar tourism thing. And it was incredible. Yeah, it was super cool. But while I was up there, I realized that for the first time in 4 years, my stomach didn't hurt when I woke up in the morning. And I was like, oh, it's because I don't have my phone. It's because I'm not responsible for this business right now. And I went back and I was like, I gotta shut it down. I can't live the rest of my life being like mildly uncomfortable, even just physically. And that was what finally sort of pushed me over the edge of, all right, I need to figure out a way to scale this back. And I did that over the course of about 18 months after that, sort of slowly working through projects, working with team members and closing it out. And as I did it, part of me was like, this is the biggest mistake you're ever going to make, because I had something that worked. If I was willing to make myself kind of unhappy most of the time, I could make it work. And it was all of this money that I put into it. And I did take a big financial hit in the business. It took several years to recover after that, but it was absolutely worth it. And it was definitely the right call.
So that's a hard decision to make. Sometimes I've talked to business owners who have like these golden handcuffs to their business of, well, the cash flows, right? It's outwardly successful. There's identity and ego often tied up in this too. And that can be a tough decision to make, but I love that it wasn't this theoretical approach of like, maybe this is better for my health. You physically felt that literally visceral difference. And we're able to do that. So what happened coming out of that period of like winding down clients? Like that led to this dry spell of nothing new coming in. That's got to be tough. How'd you set up for that? And did you expect that?
Not at all. I thought that things were just kind of going to go back to the way they were before I had the agency, but I would just charge more. And things had shifted. It was, now 10 years later, and the market wasn't the same. The clientele wasn't the same. And I didn't want to be doing the same kinds of things. So I had this massive dry spell of about 6 months where just absolute crickets, like nobody in my inbox. It didn't matter what I did. Nothing was landing. And I had just this real crisis of confidence in myself and in my decision-making, because I was like, well, I had this thing that kind of worked and now like nothing is working. Is it time to maybe get out of entrepreneurship? And I really considered it. But I told myself that I was going to go away and like just really put it out of my mind for a week and see what happened. So I went to this cabin in Mississippi and just, wandered around and walked around in the woods. And one day, as I was laying out there sunbathing, deliberately not thinking about the business, this little like voice came into my head and was like, well, what if you just quintupled your prices? And I immediately dismissed it because I was like, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Come on. But and then I was like, okay, but like, what if, and then I started really considering it. And what it ultimately came down to, I was like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen here? Are people going to not hire me harder than they're already not hiring me? No, And so I did. And it took about 6 weeks after that of me still being like, well, this is just absolute foolishness. But then I landed my biggest client to date, and it's really changed the entire trajectory of my business.
Yeah, I was looking at something yesterday and there was this graphic about like, growth mindset, versus fixed mindset. And it was a little flow chart, right? And the flow chart was like, you try something and either it works or it doesn't. Or you don't try something and it just definitely doesn't work, right? And so you had the spot where it's like, well, the clients aren't coming in, so I can try this. And like, what's the worst that happens? Still no clients come in, right? Or maybe something different happens. So what do you think was behind that? Like, so you increase these prices like dramatically, not like a 10%, 20%. You dramatically increased. Why do you think that was such a game changer for attracting new and better clientele?
So I think part of it came down to the timing of it. That was around 22, something like that. So I hit that period of time wherein it was like a year and a half after COVID. A bunch of people who had previously not been in entrepreneurship had flooded in. So there was a lot of ready cash. There were a lot of people ready to take some more risks. We also had the EIDL loan. So everyone had like chunks of money to play with. So I think that's one reason why it was successful. I think another is simply the energetics behind it of showing up and saying, nope, I am actually worth this. I can get you 10 times even what I'm charging you for your business. And nobody can do it quite like I do it. So you want me to be the one solving your problems. And I think part of it too is just positioning, right? When you position yourself as a luxury or a boutique offer, you attract a different type of clientele.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. I want to point out like a really important part here for our listeners that Rachel's touched on. It wasn't just let me increase the price, right? You also repositioned even what it was that you were offering. So walk us through that position change of sort of the before offer and the after offer.
Yeah. So the before offer was I positioned myself as I'm a really good copywriter, which is true. But that is also a very specific sort of task-based offering, as opposed to what I do now, which is marketing strategy. And that's much more of a like problem solving. It's higher level. It works at a different part of the project process. And it still allows me to do those parts of writing that I love without positioning me in the like kind of service provider space as opposed to a consultant space. And the funny thing about it is people have been telling me for years, they're like, I hire you because you're my second brain. Like you can keep up. You get this in a way nobody else does. You see things nobody else does. And I was like, I guess I'm just a really good writer then. And I didn't even think about like, oh no, I was actually doing strategy the whole time. I just didn't know how to position myself.
So you were really shifting here from like this commodity copywriting to a much higher level offer that obviously is in turn is worth far more. And it seems like you were doing a fair amount of that work before anyways, just not calling it what it was.
Yeah, it's that's been a bit of a trend actually in my entire business history is I do things and I guess I just don't talk to enough other people who do them because I think that I'm doing the same thing everyone else does. And then I'll have a client say to me like, no one has ever approached this like this before.
Yeah, I want to highlight again for our audience here, like something really valuable there, that if you are alone in your industry, in your space and not talking to other folks, like you're missing out on industry perspective that may be really valuable. And I know it can be easy to think, yes, but we're different, and you are, and you should be. That being said, it's good to know from your customer's perspective, right, your prospect's perspective, how you stack up against the perceived competition, even if it's not really there. So I love that you connected with other folks in the industry and realized, wait a minute, like I actually do things dramatically differently and far better. So there's an interesting, split opinion-wise in the industry for higher end services. We're used to buying an item off the shelf for e-commerce and you see the price for it, add it to your cart, check out now, and you're done. But on the higher end service side, many providers will hide behind the pricing and not have the pricing even visible. And they want to cover that in a discovery call or pitch that later on in something and not talk about numbers up front. Other folks are like, no, let's put the pricing out there up front and use that to qualify/disqualify people. And that way they know what they're getting into. What was your thought process around sharing pricing up front versus not? And what did that do for you?
I've almost always shared mine up front. I think I experimented for a little while with not having it, but I found it just created confusion. And so I don't have a full menu of services with pricing on my site, but I do have a starts at. So that way I can, as you say, qualify, disqualify people. I don't have to spend time answering emails where people are like, I would like to pay you $35 to solve my problem. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. And equally, it makes sales conversations much easier because no one's surprised when I go in and drop the big number. And it just makes it psychologically easier for me as well because I don't have to be like, okay, here's the price. It's like, no, you already kind of know the ballpark we're playing in. You know the types of people I work with. You're not going to be surprised.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've found that same thing in my businesses and with clients I work with as well, that especially for the higher end services, if you have a fair amount of that upfront, I even like in an online flow will recommend at times putting that on the confirmation page, thank you page, and confirmation email. So even though they're moving towards like a discovery call slash sales call slash qualification call, whatever you want to call it, right? They know in three different points before you're even on the call where your pricing is at. So that's not a question or a surprise. It's already known. And in fact, like I find, you're doing a call right when it sort of gets to the point of the conversation where there's not even a price presentation. It's just a matter of like, so like any other questions? Like, well, no, how do I move forward? You're like, well, great. Here's the cards we take. So, all right. So you made this change and you now got this, large tech client, like just weeks after that shift. Where did that come from? What doors did that open? How did that help you out validating this model and moving forward, at scale?
Yeah. So this client came to me through a referral, and they had initially hired me for a much smaller, just copywriting thing. And then they mentioned to me some things that they were looking at doing for a new initiative they were launching. They had this really innovative platform, and they were completely new to this industry space because their expertise was in law. And so they came in and were telling me about someone they had hired to build a website for them. And this person had charged them an egregious amount of money to build a website. Like, I don't have a problem with anybody earning as much money as they want to, but this was, essentially theft. Someone could have done a much better website for much less. And so I was upset that my client was being taken advantage of. And I was like, hey, this is, just what you should know about this from someone who's been doing this much longer. And they were like, wait, do you consult with people? Do you solve problems? And I was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And that's how they brought me in as their fractional CMO and launch support for what ended up splitting into two businesses, because they got halfway through and realized, oh, we need to found a legal firm to actually service these people.
That's really cool. And so you got that, you made a difference, validated your pricing model and your value model, really, right? And this is a key theme we talk about a lot in the book. It's not just about charge more or sell more stuff. It's make sure you're always over delivering on the value such that it's a no-brainer to do business with you. And you certainly did that. So at some point, scaling wise, as we all do, you can't do all the work yourself. Like, how did you transition your clients from this very high touch relationship where you do the work yourself, they work with you one-on-one, to starting to work with the teams, like their teams even?
Yeah. Well, part of it is that I don't take on that many clients at a time. So I do like to keep as much high touch relationship as I can. And I always make sure that they spend a lot of time with me, particularly in the beginning as I'm getting things set up. I also like to spend a lot of time with their teams in the beginning so I can get to know what's going on, because a lot of times what they think is a marketing problem is actually an ops problem or an HR problem. And then I can go to the founder or the CEO and be like, look, I can fix this, but what you really need to do is fire this person, or you really need to hire this or move them somewhere else, And after that, I create systems and have these periodic check-ins where I can still kind of keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on, but I make sure the trains are running on time, everybody's doing what they need to be doing. And as long as I've done my job right, that tends to work really well because people are really clear on the vision of where we're going. They know they can come to me if they get stuck on something, but they feel empowered enough to actually take responsibility for whatever it is I have them doing, that they feel excited. Because a lot of times the work I'm doing are kind of like skunk works projects, I get to pull people from different parts of the company and be like, hey, you want to do something weird? And it's exciting. So we get to do something cool together.
I love that. It's not often you see someone move from a services model to like, hey, let me just help your team do it and have that significantly high level role. This also moves you from like working with solopreneurs and drastically changing your ideal client profile. We talk about, ICP is your ideal client profile, your avatar, right? And sometimes we can change niches, right? This is a strategy we cover in the book in a number of different ways. And a lot of my clients and guests do this exact strategy, but you went from one extreme of solopreneurs to $50 million companies. Like, that is not a small shift or a little bit different of a niche. That's like very different sides of the market. What were for you operationally, anything else, the bigger hurdles in that drastic of a niche shift?
So I think the largest things were just like process differences between the way that companies move versus individuals move. And the timing is different. The cadence is different. They want to pay on different schedules. So I just had to kind of figure out like, okay, what do you need to make this work? And how do I speak this language? But I think the reason that I was able to actually swing it was that I did still approach it by looking for like the founder within the business, even if they're not the actual founder of the organization. I'm like, who's the entrepreneur here? Who speaks my language? And then I can talk to them and be like, okay, like what paperwork do I have to fill out to make this happen?
Nice. Yeah, there's certainly operational changes and workflow processes that change there. Great. So you've gone from like this plateaued six-figure business to a burn it all down, Phoenix rising, reborn, and now at the multi-seven-figure business. What have profit margins looked like now that the revenue's changed as well? And how do you look at, your business financially?
Yeah. Well, it's the margins that have definitely changed now that I don't have quite so large of a team to manage, and I'm able to sort of leave most of that with the organizations that I work with. Another element that I brought in is while I do have my marketing thing as my main thing, I've got several other revenue streams that really contribute to all of that. So I do essentially a super group offer where we do brand design and legacy brand for ultra high net worth businesses and people. And I write books as well. So I've got a couple of things kind of feeding all into this, which keeps me interested enough to do it,
Love it. And, we started the conversation talking about, $200 in a suitcase and heading off to Hong Kong and some of your travels around the world. And that's, for many business owners, a dream to be able to have that freedom to do that. What's been the impact for you on your personal freedom now that you don't need to manage your own large internal team? What does life look like for you on a day-to-day?
Oh, it's so much more restful. I feel like I have much more control over my day, even though, I could have changed things before, but it was just this self-imposed stress of like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I feel like I have to do it a way that's not a fit for me. But I get to structure my day around, I spend a lot of time talking to interesting people. I do a ton of podcast interviews, and I get to focus on projects that I really enjoy because I'm kind of the only person it impacts if I move something around. And I really love that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that oftentimes business owners have this idea that as they get bigger, that'll just mean busier and more work. And like, as the business scales, so does your personal chaos, right? And that's not always the case. You're sharing that just now. I have a guest on a previous episode for folks who caught that one that was talking about their business, like rolled up and acquired some other businesses. And I think they were like a $6 million level and working really hard. They acquired a business that just instantly added on $4 million. So they became a $10 million business, and suddenly like everyone had less to do, and that freed people up more. And like the economies of scale almost let people niche and specialize. And the business owner got so much time back by having a larger company. And so in your case, your revenues are higher, but you've shifted that from managing your own teams to having a different offering entirely that is so much more fulfilling. So big kudos on that. You touched strategy-wise on that first big client coming in as a referral. And I know that a lot of your business comes from referrals, which is wonderful. How has this change in your niche or your positioning strengthened or changed your referrals and the conversations that happen in your network?
I mean, part of it is I'm moving in different networks than I was before, which is really exciting and also pretty validating because I was pretty sure, like when I was still on the outside of that, I was like, you know what, I bet if I can talk to one person here, then I can talk to a bunch of people here, because that's how it always works. You get in with one group and you can go, and that's how it worked. But I've also become much more deliberate about my networking and my referrals. So I spend like the two main ways I get business in are podcast interviews and straight up referrals from this network I've built up over the past 17 years and change. And it kind of freaks me out sometimes because I'm like, I'm just talking to people and making friends. But I do have a deliberate system for streamlining that and making sure that I'm showing up as generously as possible, making sure I'm regularly asking. And that's led to this beautiful, like almost garden-like process of people coming in that just keeps growing.
A friend of mine broke down like wealth once in a really interesting way and was talking about how there's like the financial capital. That's what we always think about, right? Like it's the what you have. But there's also the intellectual capital or intellectual property. And that's like the what you know, which is really valuable. But the third piece is like the social capital, like the who you know. And so as you build up these networks over the year, and as you go to conferences and meetings and events and work with clients and just build relationships, like that is often the most valuable thing that can be so hard to be taken away, but also can take a lifetime to build. So the earlier and sooner you put yourself out there and get to know folks just like you did, the more you can rely on that and sort of enjoy the fruits of that labor. So that's really great. You've done that so well.
Yeah. Funny enough, I do have a bunch of people ask me, like, well, how have you automated that process? Like, do you put them through a funnel? And I'm like, here's my process. Anytime I meet with someone, I schedule an email to myself, and the subject line is check in with Jeremy. And then it sends me an email in 3 months, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm going to check in with Jeremy. That's the big secret.
Yeah, everyone's always looking to automate something that's not even working manually. It's like you can do things manually. Prove it out first. I love proving, like when, I work with clients and they want to put in some big old system or big funnel. I'm like, hey, before we put this operational SOP in place and automate and invest in software systems and all that, can we like test this with 3x5 index cards and a pen? And if it works, maybe we move towards automation, right? Or this amazing, huge 94-part funnel you want to build. Can we just test if you can get the front end sale? And like, if that has legs, then maybe we add an upsell and then add a follow on and build from there. But like, let's get an early win and build, right? It's the whole MVP concept. So for other business owners, Rachel, what piece of advice you'd have for them if they're feeling afraid to like raise their prices, like maybe that will scare away their customers? Like, what would you advise folks in that situation?
So I think it is almost always a good idea to raise your prices. And my caveat is it depends on your business model and what you actually want to get out of something. So there are definitely industries and spaces where it makes sense to go with a lower price product model. There's lots of different ways you could go with it. But I think if we're just looking at the like, oh, I'm scared about it. I mean, you got to talk that stuff out. You got to think about it and realize that it's not really about you being scared about scaring your customers off. It's a value thing, and it's a fear about your own value and visibility.
Well said. Yeah. One of the things I cover in the book is when you increase your prices, one of the most challenging parts is being comfortable saying that. Like once you are able to say it in the mirror and not cry or laugh or stutter, then you're off to the races. Like, then I can try that out and see how that goes. So knowing what you know now, looking back at that period of 6 years stuck at that six-figure mark, what would you do differently?
Well, I wouldn't start an agency if we can go back that far. I would talk to myself and be like, look, you don't really want this. Just like be a consultant instead. But if I was already in that and I was still looking for things, I would close it earlier and I would focus more deliberately on networking as opposed to just kind of hanging out and hoping that people find me.
You mean hope's not a strategy?
Gosh, I wish it was. I really tried that one out, but I have the data. It does not work.
Well, that's a beautiful segue. So speaking of data, what are the KPIs or metrics you look at in your business today to make sure your marketing strategies like stay both data-driven, but also still like human-centered? Like what are your key metrics you look at?
Oh, nobody ever asked me about this and I love it so much. So I track between 13 and 24 metrics every single week in my business across different areas. And probably 2/3 of them are the standard number stuff, right? My email opens, my list size, social media following, engagement, blah, blah, blah. All the stuff everybody knows to track. The things that I do that's different and valuable is I also track qualitative metrics, which is like, how do I feel about this area of my business? Does it exhaust me? Do I feel excited? I look at things like, what have I been putting off for a while and why? What's up with that? What do I need to do? What decision do I need to make? I also ask myself the same question every week, which is, what is the dumbest possible thing I could do to move this forward? Because a lot of times we try and overcomplicate it. And I'm like, no, like, what is the absolute stupidest thing I can do? And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, that's easy. And then it just moves the needle.
Sometimes in our family, when we're stuck making a decision, like I'm like, what do we want to do this weekend? Or where do we want to go for dinner? Like this and that. And we're sort of not getting anywhere. We'll flip the question like, all right, what are the 3 worst ideas? And sometimes those spark the like, oh my gosh, I know what we should do. And that sort of unblocks just by asking the 3 worst. So I love that. What's the dumbest idea? All right. So I love that you have a bunch of metrics, but I find oftentimes there's a difference between like a vanity metric and a real important number. And that is like, how actionable is it? Are you going to do something based on the number? Or do we just look at it and say like, okay, there's a number, it went up, it went down, but now we know. So what would you say are those key numbers that like drive you to make decisions differently?
So the first one is, how many people are emailing me because their friends told them to? That's a really important one because that's how I know that my referral network is working. And that's usually how I get new clients. So that's kind of my pipeline measurement. I also look at if there's something that has continuously annoyed me week after week and I haven't done anything about it. That's another one where I'm like, okay, that's whatever that is, that's my ops problem, because that's what it always comes back to. And finally, I look at what do I care about that I really shouldn't? So if I'm like, oh, I wish my email list was bigger, or I wish whatever, then I'm like, okay, well, that tells me where my mindset is. And then I can look at what I want to make different about that.
That's really cool. We talked earlier about note cards. I still use little sticky notes. It's how I jot down what needs to get done. I can slap it on a laptop and take it with me to a cafe. I can put just a few items down, and at the end of the day, like whatever is not done that I needed to get done, like I have to by hand write again for my list the next day. And like one of my rules of thumb is like, if I've written this again and again and again, there's a block there. Like, why am I not getting done this thing? And that I keep kicking that can down the road. And that is, to your point, you get to ask that question of like, what's the ops problem here? Like, what's the mental block? Or is this really important? Should someone else do it? Do I need to just buckle down and get it done? Do I need to not get it done? Like, why is it here? And what can we do? So, all right, before we wrap, Rachel, a few quick rapid fire questions. If you had to start all over again from scratch, what one lead source would you go all in on?
Referrals again. It's always people for me because like I've seen so many businesses come and go, and what always holds them through is the quality of their relationships with other people.
Nice. Aside from, of course, your business growth playbook, what are some of your top favorite business books?
The one I've been recommending like crazy lately is Indirect Work by Carol Stanford. Have you ever heard of it? It's like a pamphlet, tiny little pamphlet of a book, but it like reconstructs my thinking every time I read it. So her focus is we have this kind of behaviorist linear thought about change, which is if you imagine it like a billiard table, you hit the ball with the cue, the ball hits the other ball, it goes in the pocket, right? But her thing is like, yeah, but what if you could move the whole table? And she does this work of like how you can work with the unmeasurable indirect forces that affect everything that happens to us and all of our decisions. And you can actually have some control over those.
That reminds me of like in The Matrix, there's that scene where the kid's like, do not try and bend the spoon. There is no spoon, right? Total paradigm shift. That's great. Cool. Okay. That is now on my list to check out. All right. We always talk about like the mentors we expected or sought out and all, but who would you say was one of your unlikeliest mentors?
Somebody asked me the other day, like who my original copywriting mentors were. And the only thing I could say was the library, because I didn't really know anybody early on. So when I was learning about this, I went and I got a bunch of books. So I don't know if I can call that my unlikeliest mentor, but that's where I've learned so much of my business stuff, even before I was brave enough to work with a business coach or talk to anybody about it. I just read everything I possibly could.
I have yet to meet a business owner who is not also a voracious reader, audiobook listener, conference attendee, student of life and of business. Every single person I've talked to in business that's seen some success is a really good lifelong learner. So that's really cool. And the libraries, by the way, are fantastic. So I love that you do that. So to recap for our listeners, you moved from a stagnant six-figure agency model through a radical cabinet retreat breakthrough where you quintupled your prices and repositioned your expertise, allowing you to land high-value clients and scale to a $3 million business while maintaining the freedom you originally set out to find.
That's how it happened.
Love it. And for our listeners who want to learn more about you, where should they go right now?
You can find me at boltfromthebluecopywriting.com or connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing so much of your journey with us. I know I've learned a ton, and I always look forward to our lessons learned wrap up that we do after every episode where we pull out those biggest pieces from this, because that's the stuff I go back to again and again. And I appreciate you sharing so much of that journey.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.